You know, I once knew two men who grew up on the same street, went to the same schools, came from families with roughly the same income. They started life at the same place, with the same opportunities, breathing the same air. But 30 years later, one of these men was struggling to pay his bills, complaining about how unfair life had been to him, while the other had built a fortune, raised a beautiful family, and was living the kind of life most people only dream about. Now, here's the question that changed my life when I first started asking it. What made the difference? Was it luck? Was it talent? Was it connections? Let me tell you something, it was none of those things. The difference came down to something far more fundamental, something most people never figure out in their entire lives. See, the man who struggled spent his whole life fighting battles with the world around him. He fought with his boss, fought with the economy, fought with his circumstances. He looked everywhere for the reason he couldn't get ahead. But the man who succeeded, he spent his early years fighting a completely different battle. He fought with himself. He recognized that his greatest obstacles weren't out there in the world, they were inside his own head, inside his own habits, inside his own daily choices. And once he won that internal battle, everything else started to fall into place. Here's what I've learned after all these years of studying success and teaching people how to create better lives. Most of us are fighting the wrong enemy. We're looking for something to blame out there when the real enemies are right here, living inside us, sabotaging us every single day. And the tragedy is that these enemies are so subtle, so familiar, so much a part of our daily routine that we don't even recognize them as enemies. We think they're just part of life. We think they're normal, but they're not normal, they're deadly. Let me tell you about my own story. When I was 25 years old, I was broke, confused, and going nowhere fast. I had a family to support, but I could barely pay the bills. I had dreams. Sure, everybody's got dreams. But my life wasn't matching up with those dreams at all. And you know what I did? I blamed everything and everyone. I blamed the company I worked for. I blamed the economy. I blamed the fact that I didn't go to college. I blamed my background. I had a complaint for every circumstance and an excuse for every failure. I was an expert at explaining why things weren't working out. Then one day, I met a man who changed everything for me. He was a mentor, someone who'd made something of his life, and he said something that hit me like a punch in the stomach. He said, "Jim, the problem isn't out there, the problem is in here." And he pointed at me. Not at the economy, not at my job, not at my education level, at me. At first, I was offended. I wanted to argue with him. I wanted to defend myself and list all the legitimate reasons why my life was the way it was. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he said it, not with judgment, but with genuine concern. Maybe it was because I could see his life was working and mine wasn't. Whatever it was, I listened. He went on to explain that until I recognized the real enemies of my success, I would keep spinning my wheels year after year, wondering why nothing changed. He told me that success isn't complicated, but it does require something most people never do. It requires absolute honesty about what's really holding you back. And what's holding most people back isn't lack of opportunity, lack of money, or lack of connections. What's holding them back is a set of internal enemies that they've either never identified or refused to confront. Now, let me be clear about something. These enemies I'm about to share with you aren't unique to you or me. They're universal. They attack everyone, the educated and the uneducated, the rich and the poor, the young and the old. They don't discriminate. They're equal opportunity destroyers of dreams and potential. The only difference between people who succeed and people who don't is that successful people learn to recognize these enemies when they show up and they develop the discipline to defeat them. That's it. That's the whole game. The challenge is that these enemies are clever. They disguise themselves as reasonable thoughts. They masquerade as practical considerations. They present themselves as wisdom when really they're poison. They're the voice in your head that sounds like you, talks like you, and knows exactly which buttons to push to keep you comfortable in your mediocrity. And here's the thing about comfort. It's one of the most dangerous places you can be. Because when you're comfortable, you stop growing. When you're comfortable, you stop striving. When you're comfortable, you settle for less than you're capable of, and before you know it, 5 years have passed, then 10, then 20, and you're still exactly where you started, just older and more set in your ways. I've watched this happen to countless people over the years. Smart people, talented people, people with every reason in the world to succeed, but they never do. And it's not because they couldn't, it's because they wouldn't. They wouldn't do the hard work of looking in the mirror and confronting the real obstacles. They wouldn't take responsibility for their own lives. They wouldn't fight the internal battles that needed to be fought. Instead, they spent their energy managing their disappointment, protecting their excuses, and waiting for circumstances to change. But here's a truth you need to understand. Circumstances don't change until you change. Your life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by change. And that change has to start with recognizing the enemies that are keeping you from becoming who you're capable of becoming. These enemies operate in the shadows of your daily routine. They're in the small decisions you make every single day, the ones that seem insignificant in the moment, but compound over time into either magnificent success or quiet desperation. Think about this. Every day you wake up, these enemies are already awake, waiting for you. They're there when you hit the snooze button instead of getting up to work on your goal. They're there when you tell yourself you'll start tomorrow instead of starting today. They're there when you spend your evening in front of the television instead of reading a book that could change your life. They're there when you hang around negative people who pull you down instead of finding people who lift you up. They're subtle, they're patient, and they're deadly effective at keeping you from your potential. The reason most people never break free is that they never take the time to identify what's really holding them back. They live their lives reacting to circumstances, blaming conditions, and hoping things will somehow magically improve. But hope isn't a strategy. Wishing isn't a plan. You've got to know what you're fighting against before you can win the battle. You've got to be able to call these enemies by name, recognize them when they show up, and have a strategy for defeating them. Now, I'm going to share with you the 5 enemies of your success. These are the obstacles that stand between where you are right now and where you want to be. These are the invisible forces that sabotage your progress, steal your time, drain your energy, and keep you stuck in patterns that don't serve you. And the beautiful thing is this: once you can see them clearly, once you can identify them in your daily life, you can start to defeat them. You can take back control. You can start moving in the direction of your dreams instead of drifting further away from them. But I need you to understand something before we go any further. This isn't going to be easy to hear. Some of what I'm about to tell you might make you uncomfortable. You might recognize yourself in these enemies, and that recognition might sting a little. Good. That means you're being honest with yourself. That means you're ready to grow. Because the truth is, every single one of us deals with these enemies. The difference is whether we acknowledge them and fight back, or ignore them and let them win. The choice, as always, is yours. Let me tell you about the first enemy, and this one's a killer. It's killed more dreams than failure ever did. It's destroyed more potential than any economic recession. It's subtle, it's quiet, and it happens one day at a time. The first enemy is neglect. Now, before you think this doesn't apply to you, let me explain what I mean by neglect, because it's probably not what you think. Neglect is the disease of doing nothing. It's easy to do. It requires no effort, and that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. See, neglect isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly realize you've been neglecting your life. It happens slowly, almost imperceptibly, through a series of small choices that seem insignificant at the time. It's the investment you didn't make. It's the book you didn't read. It's the relationship you didn't nurture. It's the skill you didn't develop. It's the conversation you didn't have. Each individual act of neglect seems harmless, but they compound over time into a disaster. Here's what I want you to understand about neglect. It's easy to do because it requires absolutely nothing from you. It's easy to not save $1. It's easy to not exercise today. It's easy to not call that friend. It's easy to not work on your personal development. It's easy to not plan your day. It's so easy that most people do it without even thinking about it. But here's the problem. The things that are easy to do are also easy not to do. And when you don't do them, nothing catastrophic happens immediately. That's the trap. Let me give you an example. If you eat a piece of chocolate cake tonight, nothing happens to your health. You don't wake up tomorrow morning 50 pounds overweight with heart disease. The damage from one piece of cake is negligible, almost unnoticeable. So you have another piece next week, and then another. And over months and years, those pieces of cake compound into a health crisis. But you see, each individual choice was easy to make and seemed harmless in the moment. That's neglect. It's the small error in judgment repeated every day. The same principle applies to everything in life. If you don't read tonight, you don't become stupid overnight. If you don't save money this month, you don't go bankrupt immediately. If you don't call your mother this week, your relationship doesn't dissolve instantly. But neglect these things long enough, and one day you wake up ignorant, broke, and alone, wondering how it happened. Let me tell you how it happened. It happened slowly, through 1,000 small acts of neglect that you didn't think mattered. I once knew a farmer who had a beautiful property. He had good land, good equipment, and every reason to prosper. But this farmer had a habit of putting things off. There was a fence that needed mending, but he didn't get around to it. There were crops that needed tending, but he'd do it tomorrow. There was equipment that needed maintenance, but it could wait another week. And you know what happened? The fence stayed broken, and his livestock wandered onto the neighbor's property, causing all kinds of problems. The crops didn't get the care they needed, and his harvest was half what it should have been. The equipment broke down at the worst possible time, costing him more money to fix than regular maintenance would have cost to prevent. Now, was it one big catastrophe that destroyed this farmer? No. It was a series of small neglects that compounded into a failed farm. Each day, he had the choice to do what needed to be done, and each day, he chose not to. Not because he was lazy, he was actually a hard-working man, but he was working hard on things that didn't matter while neglecting the things that did. And that's a crucial distinction. You can be busy and still be neglectful. You can work long hours and still be headed in the wrong direction. Activity is not the same as productivity, and being busy is not the same as taking care of what matters. Here's another way to think about neglect. Let's say I offered you a choice. I could give you a penny today and then double that penny every day for 30 days. Or I could give you $1 million right now, cash in hand. Which would you take? Most people, if they don't know this story, would take the $1 million. It's immediate, it's tangible, it's a lot of money. But if you took the penny and let it compound for 30 days, you know what you'd have? Over $5 million. That's the power of compound interest working in your favor. But here's the thing, compound interest works both ways. It works for you when you make good decisions consistently, and it works against you when you neglect what matters. Every day you don't read, you're compounding ignorance. Every day you don't save, you're compounding poverty. Every day you don't exercise, you're compounding poor health. Every day you don't work on your relationships, you're compounding loneliness. The small daily neglects compound into a life you never intended to live. Now, working hand in hand with neglect is the second enemy, and this one might be even more insidious. It's rationalization. Rationalization is the art of lying to ourselves with style. It's how we justify our neglect. It's how we protect our excuses. It's how we make failure seem reasonable and intelligent. And let me tell you, we've all become experts at this. We can rationalize anything if we try hard enough. Rationalization sounds like this. I'd start my own business, but the economy's not right. I'd lose weight, but I don't have time to exercise. I'd read more, but I'm too tired at the end of the day. I'd save money, but I don't make enough. I'd go back to school, but I'm too old. I'd pursue my dreams, but I have responsibilities. We've got a reason for everything we don't do. And those reasons sound so good, so logical. so reasonable that we actually believe them. I'll tell you a story about a man I met years ago. This man had every reason in the world to be successful. He was smart, capable, personable, but his life was a mess. His career was going nowhere. His finances were in shambles. His relationships were falling apart. And every time I talked to him, he had a different explanation for why things weren't working out. One time it was the economy. Another time it was his boss who didn't appreciate him. Then it was his lack of formal education. Then it was his parents who didn't give him a good start. Then it was the government, the system, the competition, the market conditions. He had an excuse for everything and a solution for nothing. He spent more energy explaining his failure than working towards success. And here's what I realized about this man. He had become comfortable in his explanations. His rationalizations had become his identity. He knew who he was as a victim of circumstances, but he had no idea who he could be as a person who took full responsibility for his life. His excuses protected him from having to change, from having to try, from having to risk failure. You see, rationalization is really a form of self-protection. It protects us from feeling bad about ourselves. It protects us from having to admit we're scared. It protects us from acknowledging that we've been making poor choices. But here's what it doesn't protect us from. It doesn't protect us from the consequences of those poor choices. You can explain away your lack of savings, but that explanation won't pay your bills when an emergency hits. You can rationalize your poor health, but that rationalization won't prevent the heart attack. You can justify staying in a dead-end job, but that justification won't build the life you want. The most common rationalizations I hear are about timing. I'm too young, I'm too old, it's not the right time. Let me tell you something about timing. It's never the right time. There's never a perfect moment when all the stars align and everything is just right to start pursuing your dreams. If you wait for the perfect time, you'll wait forever. The right time is now. The right time is when you decide it's time. Then there's the education excuse. I can't succeed because I don't have a degree. Really? There are high school dropouts who became millionaires and PhDs who are struggling to pay rent. Education is valuable, absolutely, but it's not the determining factor in success. What determines success is what you do with what you have, not what you don't have. I didn't go to college, and for years, I used that as my excuse. Then I met successful people who didn't go to college either, and I had to face the truth. My lack of formal education wasn't the problem. My lack of personal development was the problem. Or how about the money excuse? I can't start because I don't have the capital. Well, every business that's worth billions today started with someone who didn't have billions. Every fortune began with someone who didn't have a fortune. You don't need everything to get started. You need something. And usually, that something is simply the decision to begin, the willingness to learn, and the discipline to keep going when it gets hard. Here's the truth about rationalization. It's creative destruction. We're destroying our potential with creativity. We're using our intelligence to explain why we can't rather than figure out how we can. And the more intelligent you are, the better you become at rationalization. Smart people can come up with incredibly sophisticated reasons for why they're not succeeding. They can build elaborate logical structures to support their excuses. But at the end of the day, an excuse is still an excuse, no matter how intelligent it sounds. Neglect and rationalization work together like partners in crime. Neglect does the damage, and rationalization explains it away. You neglect your health, then rationalize why it's okay. You neglect your finances, then rationalize why it's not your fault. You neglect your personal growth, then rationalize why you don't have time. Together, these two enemies can keep you stuck for decades, living a life that's a fraction of what it could be, all while you have perfectly good explanations for why things are the way they are. Now let's talk about the third enemy, and this one's going to step on some toes. The third enemy is being around the wrong people. You know, I've said this for years, and it never fails to make people uncomfortable. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. Your associations don't just influence you, they determine the direction of your life. Here's what I've learned. Wrong people aren't necessarily bad people. They might be good-hearted, well-meaning folks, but if they're going in a different direction than you want to go, if they're satisfied with less than you want for yourself, if they're negative when you're trying to be positive, if they're comfortable when you're trying to grow, they're the wrong people for this season of your life. And that's a hard truth to swallow, especially when some of those people are family members or friends you've known for years. I had to make this decision early in my journey. I had friends who loved to sit around and complain about everything, the government, the economy, their jobs, their lives. Every conversation was about what was wrong with the world. And I realized something. After spending time with them, I felt worse, not better. They were pulling me down to their level. They weren't bad people, but they were the wrong people for where I was trying to go. I started spending less time with the complainers and more time with people who were building something, creating something, going somewhere. And you know what happened? My whole life changed. Not because I became smarter overnight, but because I was surrounded by different conversations, different attitudes, different expectations. When everyone around you is settling for mediocrity, mediocrity seems normal. When everyone around you is striving for excellence, excellence becomes your standard. Let me be clear about something. This isn't about thinking you're better than other people. This is about becoming better yourself. There's a difference. You're not judging others, you're protecting your own future. You're not being arrogant, you're being intentional. And if people in your life get offended because you're trying to grow, that tells you everything you need to know about whether they should be in your inner circle. The wrong people come in different forms. There are the dream killers, the ones who tell you it can't be done, usually because they never tried. There are the energy vampires, the ones who drain you with their constant negativity and drama. There are the comfortable ones, the ones who are satisfied with where they are and want you to stay there with them so they don't feel left behind. And there are the critics, the ones who always find something wrong with what you're trying to do. You cannot grow while surrounded by people who are committed to staying the same. You cannot reach for more while surrounded by people who are satisfied with less. You cannot change your life while keeping all the same associations that created the life you're trying to change. Something has to give, and usually that something is your circle of influence. Now, the fourth enemy is just as devastating, not learning from your mistakes. Let me tell you, everybody makes mistakes. That's not the problem. The problem is making the same mistake twice, 3 times, 10 times, and expecting different results. That's not persistence, that's insanity. The difference between people who succeed and people who don't isn't that successful people don't make mistakes. It's that they learn from them. They extract the lesson, adjust their approach, and don't repeat the same error. I've watched people go through the same painful experience year after year because they refuse to learn what life is trying to teach them. They get into the same type of destructive relationship with a different person. They make the same financial mistake with different numbers. They trust the wrong type of people again and again, and every time they're shocked by the outcome as if they couldn't have seen it coming. Here's the thing about mistakes. They're expensive, but they're only wasted if you don't learn from them. Every failure contains a lesson. Every setback has something to teach you. But you have to be willing to look honestly at what happened, take responsibility for your part in it, and ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What will I do differently next time? Now we come to the fifth enemy, and this might be the most painful one to confront because we can't get this resource back once it's gone. The fifth enemy is poor time management. Let me put it to you straight. You're spending your life on things that don't matter. Most people are. They're majoring in minor things, while the major things go undone. They're busy, exhausted, overwhelmed, but not productive. They're spending their most valuable, non-renewable resource like it's unlimited, like there's always going to be more, like they've got forever. Here's a reality check. Everyone gets the same 24 hours. The CEO of a Fortune 500 company has 24 hours. The person working at minimum wage has 24 hours. You have 24 hours? I have. 24 hours. The difference in outcomes isn't about how much time we have, it's about how we use the time we've got. Some people build empires in their 24 hours. Others can barely pay their bills. Same amount of time, completely different results. Let me tell you about two people I knew. One was an executive who worked 80 hours a week. He was always busy, always stressed, always running from one thing to another. He barely saw his family, had no time for his health, and was heading toward a heart attack. The other was a successful entrepreneur who worked about 40 hours a week, spent time with his family, exercised regularly, read books, and seemed to have his life together. Now, here's the interesting part. The entrepreneur was making 3 times what the executive made and had a better quality of life. What was the difference? The executive was busy being busy. He was working hard on things that didn't matter. He was attending meetings that didn't need to happen, responding to every email immediately, putting out fires that shouldn't have started in the first place. He was reactive instead of proactive. He was majoring in minor things. The entrepreneur, on the other hand, had figured out what mattered most and spent his time doing those things. He was intentional. He was strategic. He understood that time management isn't about doing more things, it's about doing the right things. You know, time is more valuable than money. You can get more money, but you can't get more time. When this day is gone, it's gone forever. When this year's over, you don't get it back. You're spending your life 1 hour at a time, and the question is, what are you buying with those hours? Are you investing them in things that build your future, or are you wasting them on things that don't matter in the long run? Here's what most people do with their time. They spend hours every night watching television shows they'll forget about next week. They scroll through social media looking at other people's lives instead of building their own. They gossip about people who don't matter. They worry about things they can't control. They attend to the urgent while neglecting the important. And then they wonder why their life isn't going anywhere. Let me give you a framework for thinking about time. There are 4 categories of activities: important and urgent, important but not urgent, urgent but not important, and neither urgent nor important. Most people spend their lives bouncing between urgent things, emails, phone calls, other people's emergencies, and unimportant things like television and social media. But the magic happens in the important but not urgent category. That's where you find exercise, personal development, building relationships, strategic planning, skill development, all the things that create a better future, but don't scream for your attention today. The problem is, the important but not urgent things never demand your time. Your body doesn't scream at you to exercise until you're already sick. Your mind doesn't demand that you read books until you're already left behind. Your relationships don't force you to invest in them until they're already broken. Your finances don't require you to save until you're already in crisis. So these things get neglected day after day, year after year, until one day you wake up and realize you've spent your life on things that didn't matter, while the things that could have changed everything got pushed to the side. Here's what I want you to understand. How you spend your time is how you spend your life. If you spend your evenings watching television, you're building a television-watching life. If you spend your time complaining, you're building a complaining life. If you spend your time learning and growing, you're building a learning and growing life. It's that simple. Your daily habits, the things you do with your time, when nobody's watching, when nobody's making you do anything, that's what's creating your future. I remember when I first started taking time seriously, I began tracking how I spent my hours. I wrote down everything for a full week, every activity, every task, every distraction. And you know what I discovered? I was wasting at least 3 hours every single day on things that didn't matter. 3 hours. That's 21 hours a week, over 1,000 hours a year. Do you know what you could do with 1,000 hours? You could read 50 books. You could learn a new language. You could start a business. You could transform your health. You could build relationships that would change your life. But most people waste those hours on trivial things and then say they don't have time to improve their life. Now, here's where we bring this all together. These 5 enemies: neglect, rationalization, wrong associations, refusing to learn from mistakes, and poor time management. They don't work in isolation. They work together. They reinforce each other. You neglect what matters, then rationalize why it's okay. You hang around people who support your rationalizations. You make the same mistakes because you're not learning. And you waste your time on things that keep you comfortable in your mediocrity. But here's the good news. Once you can see these enemies clearly, once you can identify them in your daily life, you can start fighting back. You can start making different choices. And those different choices, made consistently over time, will create a completely different life. It won't happen overnight. Success never does. But it will happen if you're willing to do the work day after day, even when you don't feel like it, even when nobody's watching, even when results aren't immediate. The battle against these enemies is a daily one. You don't defeat them once and move on. You have to be vigilant every single day. You have to wake up each morning and decide that today you won't neglect what matters. Today you won't rationalize your failures. Today you'll spend time with people who lift you up. Today you'll learn from your mistakes instead of repeating them. Today you'll use your time wisely. One day at a time, one choice at a time, 1 hour at a time. And here's what happens when you start winning these daily battles. Momentum builds. Success breeds success. Good habits create more good habits. The compound effect that was working against you starts working for you. The disciplines that seemed hard at first become easier. The sacrifices that felt painful become automatic. And slowly but surely, your life begins to change. Let me leave you with this final thought. You have a choice right now, in this moment. You can continue living the way you've been living, letting these 5 enemies control your life, or you can declare war on them starting today. You can recognize that the only person standing between you and the life you want is you, not circumstances, not other people, not luck or fate, just you and the choices you make every single day. The question isn't whether you can change. You can. The question is whether you will. Will you do what's easy and comfortable, or will you do what's necessary? Will you protect your excuses, or will you pursue your potential? Will you settle for less than you're capable of, or will you fight for the life you know is possible? The 5 enemies of your success are real, they're powerful, and they're inside you right now. But so is the person who can defeat them. So is the champion. So is the person you're meant to become. The battle starts today. The choice is yours. What are you going to do with it?